Bills and resolutions we will be marking up reflect the priorities and hard work of many members of this committee, and I want to thank the ranking member and his staff for working with us to build today's agenda. I have a few items to bring to your attention up front. First, there have been requests for holdovers on SJ Res 10, S65, S1061, S Res 154, and all of the nominations on the agenda. And so I, as always, will honor that. We will take up the nominations, however, along with S65 and S1061 on Thursday, which is the next scheduled business meeting. With regard to SJ Res 10, I understand that some members of the committee are seeking additional information on the repeal of the 2002 AUMF. I'm willing to work with those members to ensure that they get answers to their questions. To that end, my staff and I are available to engage on this critical matter and, if needed, to facilitate discussions with the administration, and I urge those members who are interested to take advantage of that offer. The administration has already issued a formal statement of administration policy, or SAP, supporting repeal of the 2002 AUMF. Nonetheless, I am planning a members' briefing for the beginning of the July work period, so we will all have an opportunity to hear directly from the administration and to question State and Defense Department officials concerning the proposed repeal. We'll continue to work with Senators Kaine, Young, and others, and with the ranking member to get a markup agenda soon thereafter. Finally, I also want to mention one item that we will not be marking up today, but that is a priority for the ranking member and myself, and that is a global health bill. We are working on finalizing bill text for introduction this week, and we have agreed that we will be marking up the bill in the July work period. We look forward to sharing text with all of you as soon as it is ready and to move forward with a strong committee product. Turning to the legislative items on our agenda, as you have heard me say before, I believe the only way for this committee to be truly relevant is to be legislating on the important issues of our time, and this agenda reflects many of those issues. Let me highlight a few of them. I'd like to commend Senator Cardin for his leadership on two very important pieces of legislation on the agenda today: the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability and Reauthorization Act and the Combating Global Corruption Act. This committee must address the challenges of human rights violations and the scourge of corruption around the world, and I look forward to moving both bills out of the committee. I have two bills on today's agenda that are priorities for me, and I appreciate in particular Senator Rubio's co-sponsorship on both items. The Renacer Act recognizes the need for U.S. government to send a clear message to the Ortega regime, which is unleashing authoritarianism in a way that we have not witnessed in our hemisphere for decades. In a good news story, the Greek defense bill is a recognition of the strong bilateral relationship between the U.S. and Greece. It would bolster support for Greek military modernization and increase multilateral engagement among Cyprus, Greece, Israel, and the United States. I hope that both items receive strong support from the committee. Finally, I'd also note that we have two important resolutions on the agenda, including in relation to two unlawfully detained American citizens in Russia, Paul Whelan and Trevor Reed. And I look forward to a unanimous support on those. With that, I recognize the distinguished ranking member for his remarks. Senator Grisham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, like you, I was disappointed we weren't able to include the global health legislation on this markup. But let me say, all of us have spent a lot of time on this. I truly believe everyone is working in good faith to get us to a good place. It's complicated, no question about that. And I hope we can, as you suggested, introduce it this week and have a business meeting after we return in the 4th of July recess. I think a lot of us believe this could be one of the most significant things that, that this committee does in this Congress. As to the 2002 AUMF, the AUMFs have always been vexing. I've sat through scores of hours of testimony and arguing on that amongst the lawyers and politically and everything else. But on today's agenda was Senate Joint Resolution 10, which would repeal the 2002 authorization for the use of military force. Well, I support the assertion of congressional authority over decisions to send American men and women into harm's way. The 2002 AUMF has long been used to address threats emanating from Iraq, where our troops have been facing threats from the Islamic State and Iran-backed Shia militias over recent years. I'm further concerned about the message that this repeal could send to the region. Indeed, I think that's the most important thing that we're doing when it comes to the 2002 AUMF, because both sides agree that the existence of the AUMF probably doesn't make that much difference when it comes to making a decision as to whether or not to use military force under certain circumstances, such as the Soleimani attack, which I thought was one of the best moves that the last administration made against the Islamic State. And I'm particularly concerned about the message it would send as negotiators continue to gather in Vienna to jump back into the Iran nuclear deal. This action would send an unintended message that we are ceding security interests in Iraq to Iran. I support Senator Romney and other members of the committee in their request for a public hearing and classified briefing on the ramifications of repealing the 2002 AUMF. These are important issues, and I believe some members who haven't been here for the past 10 years plus of this debate should feel confident in the potential ramifications of repealing the 2002 AUMF before they have to vote on such a measure. And I want to thank the chairman for working on making that happen, and I have confidence he'll get that done. On the Israel bill, I would like to thank Senators Portman, Booker, Cardin, Young, and Menendez for working with our staff on the Israel Relations Normalization Act. This bill underscores the importance of normalization agreements between Israel and its Arab neighbors. The Abraham Accords and the agreements like them have the potential to fundamentally change, and are beginning to do so, the region for better. This bill calls for a strategy to strengthen and expand the accords, ensure that the agreements reap tangible economic and security benefits, and ensure that the State Department and other federal agencies are appropriately resourced to drive additional agreements forward. I understand that this bill will be held over and considered at the next markup. On the Uyghur forced labor bill, I was pleased to see Senate Bill 65 on the agenda today. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of this bill, and I would like to commend Senators Rubio and Merkley for their efforts in promoting this legislation, which, if enacted, would have a meaningful impact on combating the use of forced labor in Xinjiang and throughout China. I also understand that this bill has been held over and will be considered at the next markup. As far as Senator Cardin's anti-corruption bills, I'd also like to recognize him for his leadership and join the chairman in that regard in highlighting the problems of the global corruption and putting forth proposals to address these issues. The Global Magnitsky Act is a vital tool to combat corruption and human rights abuses around the world. I'm eager to reauthorize it through Senate Bill 93. We have seen certain countries use corruption as a geopolitical weapon, and the provisions of Senate 14, the Combating Global Corruption Act, if enacted, will hopefully help our government expose and counter such efforts. I'm also happy that we were able to take up the two resolutions on U.S. citizens and former Marines Paul Whelan and Trevor Reed, both of whom have been arrested, falsely convicted, and imprisoned by the Russian government. Russia must cease holding our citizens as political hostage, which is exactly what this is. Finally, the resolution calling on all parties in Georgia to sign and fulfill the agreement made on April 19th is an excellent effort by Senators Johnson and Shaheen that I'm proud to co-sponsor. All political parties in Georgia must put their disagreements in the past and fulfill their obligations under the agreement. This is the only path to improving Georgia's democratic institutions. I don't see Senator Shaheen here. She and I were there in 2012 when they had their initial elections. I think both of us have been happy with those elections to start with and have had disappointments along the way. We continue to meet with the various political parties. In my judgment, they over-rely on the United States to move things forward. And every time I meet with them, my message is, you, Georgians, need to figure this out and move this forward. And I'll continue with that message. With that, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Given that a vote has just started, I intend to first turn to take up a number of those items, those without amendments in block. Then I'll turn to S93. I realize that many of you want to discuss some of the items that were held over, and I support that discussion, but I would ask you to hold off until after we've taken the committee vote, since we have the appropriate quorum at this time. With that, Without objection, we'll now consider 7 bills and resolutions on the agenda in block as amended by the following noticed amendments, as well as a Foreign Service Officer promotion list. S 1041 is amended by the manager's amendment. S 2000 in the nature of a substitute. S 14 is amended by the manager's amendment. S Res 67. S Res 165 is amended by the manager's preamble. S Res 107. S Res 176 as amended by Johnson's first degree amendment number 1, Johnson first degree amendment number 2, and the manager's resolving clause amendment, and FSO less USAID pin 479. Is there a motion to approve these items in block?
So moved.
As amended by the notice amendments I just referenced? It's been so moved. Is there a second? A second? Yes. No amendments were filed on these bills, and so
No.
we have not, no, S93 is not in the in-block group, yes. So again, a motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed will say nay. The ayes have it, and those bills and resolutions, as well as the Foreign Service lists, are approved and sent to the Senate with a favorable recommendation.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Markey.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on one of those bills that we just passed.
Could I ask you to withhold a moment, and then we will turn to a full conversation? Let me turn to S93, the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Reauthorization Act. Before we have amendments on it, is there a motion to approve the substitute amendment? So moved. Is there a second? Second. Motion's been made and second. The question is on the motion to approve the substitute amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. With that, my understanding is, are there any further amendments? Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would call up Cruz first degree 1 and Cruz second degree to Cruz first degree 1. What both of these bills, these amendments do, is impose global Magnitsky sanctions on the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, and the regime's recently elected president-elect, Ibrahim Raisi. Both of them are currently and well-deservedly sanctioned right now under Executive Order 13876 because of their ties to the office of the Supreme Leader, which sets Iran's foreign policy, including its repeated attacks on American troops, its global terrorism, its unacceptable actions in international waters, and of course its seemingly never-ending drive for nuclear weapons. However, just yesterday, Biden administration officials were asked if they intended to keep those sanctions in light of Raisi's election. They reiterated that they were likely to revoke much of the Trump-era sanctions regime. Both Khamenei and Raisi richly deserve to be sanctioned under Global Magnitsky for corruption and human rights abuses. Khamenei has used corruption, violence, and confiscation to amass a conglomerate of entities worth approximately $200 billion stolen from the Iranian people. His 3 most valuable possessions are the execution of Imam Khomeini's order, the Mustazafan Foundation, and the Astan Quds Razavi. These companies also conduct international business. The U.S. should use Global Magnitsky to isolate and to freeze this business empire and to block the regime. And as for Raisi, Raisi is a monster and a tyrant. He was one of the 4 judges on the death committees in 1988 responsible for the mass executions of thousands of political prisoners over 5 months. He then served as a prosecutor in Tehran and other judiciary positions, which he used repeatedly and systematically to persecute Iranian dissidents. And he has already said he intends to intensify crackdowns and increase Iran's military aggression. And so I would urge adoption of these amendments.
Thank you. Senator Cardin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me thank Senator Menendez and Senator Risch for bringing forward the Global Magnitsky Reauthorization Act. I also want to thank you for including in the package S14 the combating global corruption, because this committee has been a leader on fighting corruption. I want to thank Senator Young for his help on the combating global corruption, where we will be able to evaluate every country's mission to fight corruption with tier ratings, and those that are not making significant progress will be subject to sanctions. But more importantly, we'll also have capacity in each mission to deal with how a country is dealing with corruption. The Global Magnitsky Reauthorization, S93, reauthorizes this program and it strengthens this tool. Senator Wicker is my co-sponsor, and I know supported by a lot of members of this committee. The Global Magnitsky has worked. It was an initiative by Congress, resisted initially by the administration, and has now become a global standard. We've gotten our allies to act on the Global Magnitsky framework. Canada, UK, Europe have all followed Americans' leadership. We know that this discussion has been on the agenda of Mr. Putin. We certainly have reached him. So, Senator Cruz, you raised a very valid point about making sure we have sanctions against anyone who's violating these basic principles, but I oppose your amendment, and I need to explain why. It's very important that we're dealing not just with visa restrictions, but also banking restrictions and confiscating money. And there is a process that needs to be followed in each of these cases. And that's been one of the hallmarks of why Global Magnitsky has been so well received among the democratic states of the world, because we have a process. We've also